Hare Krishna, welcome to this special program on the systematic study of the best of all the revealed scriptures in the world, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we begin today's session, I shall chant a few prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayeta Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, I would like to welcome all the viewers again to this very special program on the systematic study of the topmost among all the revealed scriptures of this world, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam that contains a total of 12 cantos, 335 chapters and 18,000 shlokas. We are now in the analysis and study of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we have already heard in the first part of the study of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam the very wonderful history of the descendants and the great personalities who appeared in the family of Swayambhuva Manu. The main content and subject matter of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the very wonderful history of the great personalities and kings that appeared in the family of Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu had 5 children. The name of his wife is Shatarupa, and these 5 children consist of 2 sons and 3 daughters. The 2 sons are Priyavrata, Uttanapada, and the 3 daughters are Devahuti, Akuti and Prasuti. So the Srimad Bhagavatam has already narrated the history of Devahuti, Akuti, and yesterday we also heard the history of Prasuti. And after that we had the very fascinating and amazing history of one of the greatest devotees at the beginning of creation, the history of Maharaja Dhruva. So Dhruva is the son of Uttanapada, and how he became the first personality in this universe to attain the highest perfection of going back to the spiritual world, going back home to the eternal kingdom of God, was wonderfully narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam from chapter 7 up to 13. And now we proceed ahead. The fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam contains 31 chapters and 1443 shlokas. So beginning from again chapter 13 of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam describes the dynasty, the descendants of Maharaja Dhruva. As I had mentioned yesterday also, Dhruva had 2 wives by name Brahmi and Ila. the eldest son of Maharaj Dhruva, his name was Utkala. And Utkala was completely detached from all material affairs and connections, and therefore without entering into the royal order or in any administrative post, Utkala decided to completely dedicate himself to the devotional service of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and in this way he went to the forest, and after some time, by intense spiritual practice of Bhakti Yoga, Maharaj Utkala also attained the spiritual kingdom and went back home, back to Godhead. So his younger brother by name Vatsara became the king, and after that the children of Vatsara and all the great kings and the various family dynasty members of Maharaj Dhruva are very elaborately explained. Moving further, in the family of Dhruva Maharaj, there later appeared a king by name Anga Maharaj, and Anga Maharaj married a woman by name Sunitha. Anga and Sunitha later had a son, a child by name Vena. And later in chapter 14 of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the narration of the history of King Vena, Maharaja Vena. Somehow like a black spot in the pure clear waters or in pure white milk, Maharaj Vena appeared like that black spot in the family dynasty of the great pure devotee Dhruva Maharaj. Practically all the kings and all the family members and the descendants of Maharaj Dhruva were very, very exalted personalities who were very advanced in spiritual life, and most of them were guided by the greatest spiritual master of this universe, Narada Muni, and they attained the supreme destination of the human form of life. Now in this dynasty appeared a very demoniac and an atheistic temperament king by name Vena. This Vena, right from his childhood, had a very, very cruel heart. Even while playing with young children, this Vena, he would sometimes grab some children and throw them into a flowing river, and would enjoy the torturous way when the children would drown in the water and die. So in this way, Vena was a very, very cruel-hearted person. And after some time, when Anga Maharaj retired from his family life and went away to the forest and to an isolated place to practice spiritual life, then the next king was Maharaj Vena. So this Vena was a very cruel person. So by his influence, he could bring all the rogues and thieves and the mischievous elements in the kingdom by his strong power. But the great problem was that he was a much bigger thief, a much bigger rogue, and a much more mischievous person than all the petty thieves and rogues. So the people started suffering during the reign of Vena Maharaj, and this Vena was also a very atheistic king who defied the supreme order of the Supreme Lord, and he had a royal decree passed in the entire kingdom with the sounding of bugles and kettle drums that from now onwards he made the rule that there should be no yagna, no sacrifice, no worship. No one should worship the Supreme Lord in his kingdom. So he kind of brought a lockdown for all the religious places, for all the temples and for all the places of worship. And we can even see the situation in today's scenario, wherein politicians are so concerned and anxious to shut down all religious gatherings, all places of worship, which can provide actually the final ultimate relief from all the miseries and all the sufferings of the world. But the politicians do not care, do not mind even to open liquor shops where people gather in huge numbers to drink these toxic, highly toxic and poisonous drinks. So that is fine, but the opening of temples, the opening of the places of worship, religious gatherings by which one can invoke the supreme intervention of the supreme authority of this world, who can drive away all the sufferings and miseries of this world. The cause for suffering in this material world is our defying the authority of the Supreme Lord, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this universe, all the devatas, all the great personalities of this world have taught us that just by being obedient to the laws of the Supreme Lord and of Mother Nature, we can lead a healthy, happy and a godly life in this world and also attain the supreme destination of life. So, in this way, Vena Maharaj passed a royal order banning and making a lockdown of all the places of worship and all acts of religious significance. So when the great sages and the spiritual personalities and the brahmanas of the kingdom became aware of such a cruel and such a atheistic order passed by Maharaj Vena, they all gathered together, and actually the kings were supposed to rule according to the guidance of the spiritual principles given by the priestly and the spiritual personalities of the kingdom. That is the right way to rule, and the kings of yore were known as Raja Rishis. They were as exalted as great sages, and they were never autocratic. Monarchy is sometimes accused by the modern politicians to be an autocratic form of government, where the king rules simply according to his own whims and fancies and by his sweet will. But that is not the case. The kings would always abide by the counsel of the great sages and personalities, and who would be further guided by the Dharma Shastras, by the Vedic scriptures, which give the perfect roadmap, the perfect plan for the entire society, for both material as well as the most important, the spiritual development and upliftment of the entire society. So that is the right way for kings to rule. But sometimes there may be an odd man, an odd person out, and that was the case with Maharaj Vena. And even during such a time, the corrective measures could be taken. It was not a completely autocratic system. So now the Brahmanas all gathered together and consulted among themselves and finally took the decision to kill Maharaj Vena. But the Brahmanas and the great sages would not take up any weapon or sword or gun in order to fight and kill a defiant king or an opponent. The sages were so powerful that just by chanting some hymns and mantras, they could immediately bring about the death of this atheistic king Vena. So now Maharaj Vena was killed by the great sages and personalities, but there was no qualified king to rule the world. So all these great sages and Brahmanas, although themselves could have taken up the role of being a king or an administrator, but they stuck to their own swadharma, to their occupational duties of being on a higher level, of being advisors and guides, and to principally engage themselves in the spiritual culture of life, and not to become implicated and absorbed in the material processes and activities of administration. So therefore all the sages and these Brahmanas again came together, and in order to get a new king, in order to have a qualified person to become the king, they could understand that even the seminal dynasty coming from the great personality Dhruva Maharaj had great potency to produce the next qualified person to rule over the world. And therefore by a very special and a scientific process, they could churn the body of Vena Maharaj and bring forth another personality who was highly qualified and who was also a Shaktya-vesha avatara, an incarnation of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So that son of Vena is Prithu Maharaj. Prithu is another incarnation, and he belongs to a very special category of incarnations. The Supreme Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Lord Krishna, has 6 varieties of incarnations: the Purushavatarās, the Gunavatarās, the Leelavataras, the Yugavataras, the Manvantara Avatars, and Shakti Avesha Avataras. So the Shakti Avesha Avataras are like the 4 Kumaras, Narada, Prithu Maharaj, Vedavyasa. So they belong to this category of Shakti Avesha Avataras, or empowered incarnations. So what are Shakti Avesha Avataras or empowered incarnations? So that is very nicely described in the Srimad Bhagavatam and many other scriptures, that Shaktya-vesha Avataras are basically Jivatmas. Although they are Anu Atmas or Jivatmas, they are not directly the Supreme Lord, they are not directly Vibhu Bhagavan, yet although they are Anu Amshas, they are specifically endowed or empowered with a specific Shakti by the Supreme Lord, by the Vibhu Bhagavan. And such personalities who are, you can say, like a dual or a double role or a combined form of Jivatma with the Shakti, with a specific Shakti or potency of Paramatma, such personalities are known as Shakti Avesha Avataras or empowered incarnations. nations. So Prithu Maharaj was empowered with the Shakti of Shasana or administration. So Prithu Maharaj in this way being empowered with the Shakti of Shasana. Likewise Veda Vyasa is empowered with the Shakti of Vyasatva, of compiling all the Vedic literatures. And another Shaktiyavesha avatara like Narada is empowered, is endowed with the Supreme Lord's Shakti or the energy of Bhakti. So Narada is the Bhakti Shakti Avesha avataras. Likewise the four Kumaras, they have the Shakti of Jnana or transcendental knowledge. So now here from the 15th chapter of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the very wonderful history of Maharaja Prithu. From the 15th chapter up to the 23rd chapter, in 9 chapters, the wonderful history is of Maharaja Prithu, the most ideal king of the world, has been narrated, has been described. So Prithu Maharaj, he is actually an avatara, a Shaktiyavesha avatara of the Supreme Lord Krishna, but at the same time, because he is a Shaktiyavesha avatara, that means he is also basically the Jivatma endowed with a specific Shakti like Narada. Hence, he displayed both the characteristics of being the Supreme Lord Vishnu and also the characteristics of a pure devotee of Lord Vishnu. So both these things were displayed in the character and in the life of Prithu Maharaj. So Prithu Maharaj, he later married Archi. So Prithu and Archi, they got married, and now Prithu Maharaj became the king of the entire world. And after becoming the king, Prithu Maharaj observed that the earth had stopped providing its necessary supplies to the living beings of this world due to the previous rule or misrule of Vena Maharaj. This is a very, very important point to understand, that there is actually no scarcity. There is no scarcity of anything in this material world. Even in this material world, by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord and by Mother Nature, they have provided everything requisite for the entire population of human beings and all the living beings of this universe. Sometimes we are concerned with the problem of overpopulation, but just look at the population of even ants in even a city like Bangalore. How many ants are there? Where is the organization that is feeding all the ants? So who is feeding all the ants? To the elephants, to all the living creatures, and taking care of all their needs and requisites. It is the Supreme Lord. So likewise, and along with the Supreme Lord has has appointed Mother Nature, Prakriti, to take care of all the living beings. But Mother Nature and the Supreme Lord have a system in this material world, that although the ideal situation is that of complete surrender to the Supreme Lord, but because the living entities in this samsara, in this material world, have fundamentally come to this world because they have turned away from the Supreme Lord. So these living entities, who are all of us, who are averse to the Supreme Lord, yet we need to, when Mother Nature and when the Supreme Lord are providing everything required, from the food that we eat to the water that we drink and to the air that we breathe every moment, whatever advancement we may do by our so-called brains, which is also provided by the Supreme Lord and Mother Nature, we cannot produce a single grain of food in all our industries and laboratories. We cannot create even a single vegetable or a fruit by any of our scientific advancement, by any of our technological wonders. So all these are the gifts given by the Supreme Lord and Mother Nature. So minimum, there is some acknowledgement and some obedience to the laws of nature, and then the supply chain from Mother Nature would be bountiful and abundant for all the living entities of this world. There is no problem actually of any kind of overpopulation. In fact, even today, in such a sinful scenario of the world, wherein humans are engaged in the most cruel, abominable and heinous activity of killing millions and billions of poor animals just to satisfy their palate, even then the Supreme Lord and Mother Nature, according to the present day situation, it is said that the land provides at least 10 times the grains required for the present population of this world. It is we, the politicians, the governments and all the so-called economists who have failed, who are an utter failure in managing and distributing the gifts given by Mother Nature and the Supreme Lord. So during the time of Vena Maharaj, because Vena was an atheistic king, the earth had restricted its supplies. So therefore we should learn that whenever people become atheistic, and especially the ruling class, the administrators, the government becomes atheistic and openly defies the authority of the Supreme Lord, the earth, Mother Nature and the Supreme Lord restrict their supply of the natural gifts that have been provided. So that was the situation during Vena Maharaj. So now Prithu Maharaj, with the intention of rectifying this situation in order to properly take care of all the citizens and all the inhabitants of his kingdom, set out, and then he made the perfect arrangement directly with Mother Earth to supply all the things required for a happy, healthy and good life in his kingdom. So therefore Mother Earth got the name after Prithu Maharaj as Prithvi. Earth is also known as Prithvi after the intervention, after Maharaj Prithu extracted all the necessities from Mother Earth. So that is also very wonderfully described, and later how Maharaj Prithu had a small confrontation with Indra, and then the Supreme Lord Vishnu personally appeared in the sacrificial arena of Prithu Maharaj, and finally how Prithu Maharaj gave his very, very valuable instructions to all the citizens of his kingdom, and finally he retired and went back home, back to Godhead, to the eternal kingdom of the Supreme Lord, to Vaikuntha Loka. So here again, after Maharaj Prithu, there is a further description of the descendants of the family members who came after Prithu Maharaj, and coming down. One of the descendants of Maharaj Prithu, that is a descendant of Dhruva Maharaj or Swayambhuva Manu, was a king by name Barhishat. He was also known as Prachina Barhishat because he had engaged in the performance of many sacrificial performances. So Maharaj Prachina Barhi married Shatadruti, and Prachina Barhi and Shatadruti had 10 sons who were collectively known as the 10 Prachetas. So now these 10 Prachetas went to the southern western shore, and they entered a very beautiful lake. When they approached the shores of that lake, they were greeted in that place by none other than Lord Shiva, who was residing inside that lake. This specific place has been identified as the place called Guruvayur in the state of Kerala. So that's the location, that's the place where the Prachetas went to perform tapasya. And the Prachetas, as they approached this very beautiful lake that is still located in the presence, in the premises of the very sacred Guruvayurappan temple. So at that time, Lord Shiva approached the 10 Prachetas, and he was very pleased with their dedicated spiritual demeanor and their determination to perform penance and austerities in bhakti yoga, in pure devotional service to worship the Supreme Lord Krishna, Lord Vishnu. So at that time, Lord Shiva became the Guru, became the spiritual master of the 10 Prachetas, and gave them the very beautiful and important spiritual mantra, Gita, a song known as Rudra Gita. So this is recorded in chapter 24 of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Shiva approached the 10 Prachetas, and he was very pleased with the 10 Prachetas. And he said that I shall now instruct you in this prayer, which also gives the perfect description of the divine form of the Supreme Lord Krishna. And this is recorded in 4.24.33 onwards. Shri Rudra Uvacha. So this is the song sung by Lord Shiva in glorification, in praise of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. So I shall chant a few prayers. In 4.24.34 in the Rudra Gita, the prayer is Namah Pankajanabhaya Bhuta Sukshmendriyatmane Vasudevaya Shantaya Kutasthaya Swarochishe. My Lord, my Supreme Lord, you are the origin of the entire creation by means of the lotus flower that sprouts from your navel. Namaha Pankajanabhaya. You are the supreme controller of the senses and the sense objects, and you are the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. You are Shantaya, most peaceful, and because of your self-illuminated existence, your never disturbed by the 6 kinds of transformations that the living entities in this material world are subject to. So that is called the Kutasthaya. The living beings in this material world are always subject to the 6 kinds of transformations. They take birth, they then start growing, they have some byproducts like children, etc. And then they start dwindling, and finally they die, they vanish. So this is the story, the script of the life of all the living beings, from an ant to a human being to even a devata, the topmost devata of this world, that they take birth, they live for some time, they grow, they give some byproducts, they create some things, and then they start dwindling, and finally they die, the end. So this is the story of every living entity in this world. Whereas the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, is never subject to these 6 transformations of the material world. Further, Lord Shiva in his Rudra Gita, he prays Sankarshanaya Sukshmaya Durantayantakaya Cha Namo Vishwaprabodhaya Pradyumnantaratmane. My dear Lord, you are the origin of the subtle material ingredients, the master of all integration as well as the master of all disintegration, the predominating deity named Sankarshana, who is the master of all intelligence, and also the predominating deity Pradyumna. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So in this way, there is the very, very beautiful Rudra Gita, the song of Lord Shiva, instructed personally by Lord Shiva unto the 10 Prachetas. So receiving this, the 10 Prachetas then entered the waters of this sacred lake, and exactly according to the direction and instruction given by Lord Shiva, they began to perform severe penance and austerities, and finally had the darshan of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, of Lord Krishna. Meanwhile, the father of the 10 Prachetas is King Barhishat, or King Prachina Barhi. So Prachina Barhi, meanwhile, when he was living in his kingdom, at that time Prachina Barhi was completely absorbed in material affairs and in material activities, and he had somehow neglected the path of spiritual culture and spiritual practices to make a spiritual progress. So seeing his degraded condition, being absorbed only in materialistic affairs and sacrifices, the great sage Narada, who is practically the supreme guide and spiritual master of all the saintly kings and Rajarshis of the dynasty of Swayambhuva Manu and for the entire universe, Narada once came to the palace of King Prachina Barhi, and then addressed the king that why are you so absorbed in only these material performance of sacrificial ceremonies. And then Narada could observe the material addiction of Prachina Barhi king, that he was unable to appreciate or grasp the value of spiritual instruction, and therefore to make it easy for Prachina Barhi to understand the significance and importance of spiritual life and spiritual culture, Narada began to narrate a story, an allegorical story, which is one of the most fascinating and one of the most captivating and a very, very important instruction for understanding the real condition of every living entity in this universe. The name of this story, narrated by Narada to Prachina Barhi, is the story of King Puranjana. The story of King Puranjana. Please hear this very, very attentively, and please give special attention to all the various characters and the various situations and all the details of this story. This is a very wonderful story which is very appropriate and suitable for everyone in this material world, because all of us are in a similar condition like Maharaj Prachina Barhi, being absorbed completely in our materialistic activities and affairs. So this can extricate, this is a story that can impress even the dullest, even the most foolish of materialistic people to understand the value and significance of the Jivatma, Paramatma and everything concerning spirituality. So now let us begin with the wonderful and fascinating, captivating story of King Puranjana. So long back, there was a king by name Puranjana. The name of the king is Puranjana. King Puranjana had a most intimate friend whose name was Avighyata, who always was the best well-wisher of King Puranjana. But somehow King Puranjana got diverted to so many things, and he neglected the best friendship of Avighyata. And King Puranjana now set out on an expedition of the entire world. He visited many towns and forests and various places. And after a very long time, after wandering over the entire world, he finally arrived at a most beautiful city, a most opulent city, decorated with all kinds of opulences and decorations. So Maharaj Puranjana was attracted and captivated by the opulence of this city. He observed that this Pura, this city that he had now encountered, had 9 gates. 9 gates. So King Puranjana now entered this very beautiful opulent city of 9 gates, and as he entered, he came across a most beautiful and charming woman. And as soon as King Puranjana saw this woman, it was like a love at first sight, and he lost his heart and everything to the charms of this beautiful woman, and he approached her. As King Puranjana approached this woman, this very beautiful woman, he observed that this beautiful woman had a very strong bodyguard in the form of a serpent, a snake with 5 hoods. So she was protected by a snake with 5 hoods, and she also had 10 servants who also had a leader. So totally 11 servants were always protecting her. So in this way, King Puranjana observed this beautiful woman. He approached her and expressed his heart and desire to marry her. Now this woman also was attracted by the handsome Puranjana, and she accepted his proposal, and in this way Puranjana got married to this very beautiful woman who is now named as Puranjani, who is now living with Puranjana as his wife. So in this way, King Puranjana married his wife named Puranjani, and they started living together very, very happily in this city, the city of 9 gates. And as time passed, King Puranjana with every passing day became more and more attached to his wife, and he gradually became so enamored and captivated by everything of his wife that he almost became a Xerox copy of his wife. When she would sit, even Puranjana would sit. When she would stand, King Puranjana would stand. When she would laugh, he would laugh. When she would become sad, even King Puranjana would become sad. When she cried, King Puranjana also cried. So whatever she did, King Puranjana shared all her emotions and experiences with his dearmost wife. And time passed, and as time passed, there was an enemy king. The name of this enemy king was Chandavega. So this Chandavega had an army of 720 soldiers, out of which the 360 soldiers were with white uniform and 360 soldiers had black uniforms. So Chandavega with his army of 360 white and 360 black, 720 soldiers, he also befriended very, very ugly woman by name Prajwara, and her name is Kala Kanya, also known as Jara. He also had a younger brother by name Prajwara, and with making a team, making a battalion, making a unit of all these soldiers and his assistants, King Chandavega launched an attack and assault on the city of King Puranjana, the city of 9 gates. So all these soldiers entered, the various soldiers of King Puranjana, including the 10 bodyguards of his wife, the snake, all of them struggled for a very, very long time. But finally, they were unable to match up with the attack of King Chandavega. King Chandavega gained the upper hand day by day. They started to break every rampart and every wall and everything of the city of 9 gates. And helplessly, Puranjana watched as everything of his city, the city of 9 gates, was completely destroyed by the army of Chandavega. So, and King Puranjana was mercilessly, helplessly, he was dragged out of the city of 9 gates by Chandavega. Actually, this is a very, very, very long story, and I have narrated this in a nutshell, in a very brief manner. There is many things that happen later, and but it is very significant, even if we understand even this much portion of the story of King Puranjana. When Prachina Barhi was thus hearing And I hope all the viewers are also raptly hearing this story and all the details of this story. So, Prachinabar, he was wonderstruck and surprised, but he could not understand the real meaning of this story. And then Narada, the great sage, the most merciful person in this entire universe, the most merciful guru who has the great desire to elevate everyone to spiritual knowledge and understanding, then explained the real import and purport and meaning of this story. Narada revealed that actually this is an allegorical story. An allegorical story, and King Puranjana. Puranjana actually refers to the Jivatma. The Jivatma, that means the story of King Puranjana is actually the story of you, me, and every living entity in this universe. The story of all of us, the story of me, the story of you. So please take attention. This is your story, this is my story, this is everyone's story. We are in this samsara, we are lost in this material world, and we wander on an expedition to all the various parts of the world, to all the various cities and places. In this way, we wander in the cycle of birth and death in 84 lakh species of life. And finally, Puranjana, that is I and you and all the living entities, come to the platform, come to the city of 9 gates, which is Manushya Janma, the human form of life. So after wandering the entire world in 84 lakh species of life, the Jivatma obtains the human form of life, the Manushya Janma. So how is the human body the city of 9 gates? We have the 9 apertures or the 9 holes or the 9 gates. The 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, the mouth. So 2, 2, 2, 6 plus 1, 7, and then the genital organ and the evacuating organ. 8 plus 1, 9. So the human body consists of these 9 gates or 9 apertures or holes, and therefore it is compared to a city of 9 gates. And the Jivatma, the Puranjana, all of us enter into this human body, the city of 9 gates, and there we are attracted to the most beautiful woman, that is the material intelligence or buddhi, and we create a wedlock. Actually, buddhi is a subtle material element, and by the wedlock of ahankara, or false ego, we falsely identify that this is my body, the city of 9 gates is my identity, and the city of 9 gates, we become locked, we become entangled with the material intelligence which is protected. Our body is protected by the snake of 5 hoods, that is the 5 eggs, the 5 pranavayus, udana, samana, vyana. So these are the 5, this is the 5-hooded snake that protects us, the body, the city of 9 gates. And then there are 10 bodyguards of intelligence, which are the 5 Jnanendriyas and the 5 Karmendriyas, and the head of all these senses is the Manaha, or the mind. So in this way, the city of 9 gates is the human body, the wife is intelligence, the 5-hooded snake is the 5 kinds of pranavayu that circulate in the air, that circulate in the body, the 10 senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and the 5 working senses. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses are the Shrotram, Tvag, Grana, Drig, Jihva, the ears, the eyes, the nose, the tongue for tasting, and the skin for touch. They are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and the 5 working senses are Shrotram, Tvag, Grana, Drig, Jihva, Vak, Dor, Medrangri, Payavaha. The tongue as the talking organ, the hands for working, the legs for movement, the genitals for procreation, and the anus for evacuation. So these are the 5 working senses, and all of them are managed by the brain or by the mind. So it is the mind is the leader of these 10 senses. He is the boss, the manager. So in this way, we, the living soul, the Jivatma, is none of these. He is the Puranjana. He has now come to stay in this city of 9 gates, the human form of body, and gradually with the passing of time, with every passing moment and with every passing day, we become more and more absorbed in the bodily conception of life. We think that the body, our identity as the Sharira, is all in all. This is what I am. So this is the illusion brought about by the soul's entanglement with material buddhi. So it keeps increasing, and finally, but there is an enemy here in this material world, King Chandavega. So earlier to that is how we become entangled in material activities. So we are completely under the dictation. The Jivatma, although has no connection with any material element of the senses, the mind, the intelligence, or the city of 9 gates, yet becomes so absorbed that when the mind dictates to us that you should sit or stand or cry or be happy or whatever the mind dictates, the soul becomes completely a slave or subservient to the dictates of the mind. So now the enemy is King Chandavega. Chandavega with his 720 soldiers, 360 white uniformed and 360 black uniformed, is none other than Kala. So Kala is Chandavega. Chandavega means he cannot be stopped. He comes with such force that there is no person in this world who can counteract the onslaught of the attack of Chandavega or time. With the 360 soldiers are 360 days of the year, and 360 black uniformed soldiers are the 360 nights of the year. So they attack along with Kala Kanya or Jara is old age. Time has many assistants and helpers to come and destroy the human body, the city of 9 gates, and one of the most powerful is the onset of old age. So Kala Kanya comes, then there is also Prajvara. Prajvara means high temperature or a high fever. So all that is various kinds of diseases. So diseases, old age, time, they all attack all together on the city of 9 gates, our human body. Every year we become more and more weaker by this attack and onslaught. So they destroy all the organs and all the various parts of our body, and one day they completely destroy everything and drag King Puranjana, that is I, you and everyone, the living entity, the Jivatma, is dragged out of this city of 9 gates, that is the human form of body. This is the story of King Puranjana. No, this is the story of each and every one of us, of you, me, and every living entity in this material world. So, is there a solution? Is there a way we can get out of this entanglement? I explained all the various details of the story. One thing I had missed out. That originally King Puranjana had his most intimate well-wisher friend by name Avigyata, and that is the Paramatma, the Super Soul, the Supreme Lord in the heart of every living entity. If we surrender to that Avigyata, who is in our present condition, Avigyata means unknown, but when we properly understand and surrender to the Supreme Lord, we can attain liberation and go back to the eternal supreme kingdom of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world in Vaikuntha Loka. So this is the story narrated by Narada to King Prachinabarhi, and when Prachinabarhi actually heard the meaning and understood all its intricacies of the real situation of every living entity, including himself, immediately Prachinabarhi was enlightened. He left his kingdom and went to the forest and practiced tapasya in devotional service to Lord Hari and went back home, back to Godhead. Meanwhile, the Prachetas came back. They married Marisha, the daughter of the Vanaspati, of the forest, and brought and of Chandra, of the moon, and they had already been enlightened by the instructions of Lord Shiva in the form of Rudra Gita, and they had already had the darshan of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So they began to start ruling the kingdom, the entire world, and after some time again they were visited by the great sage Narada. Narada again gave very, very valuable instructions and teachings to the 10 Prachetas. One very, very important instruction given by Narada to the Prachetas in his teachings is found in 4.31.14 in the final concluding chapter of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So in 4.31.14, Narada says that Yatha taror mula nishechanena tripyanti tat skandha bhujopashakhaha प्राणोपहाराच्च यथेन्द्रियाणां तथैव सर्वार्हणमच्युतेज्या. He gives a very, very beautiful example. Just like if you want to provide nourishment to a tree, it is foolish to go and put water on every leaf and twig and branch and every part of the tree. The wise thing is yatha taror mula nishechanena. One should provide water to the mula, to the root of the tree, by which automatically every part, every leaf, every twig and branch of the tree would be supplied with water and nourishment. Or if you want to provide nourishment to a finger of your body, you cannot take this finger and dip it in the food. You have to use the finger to provide food to the mouth, to the stomach basically, and from the stomach it would be provided not only to the finger, to all the various parts of the body. And likewise, tathaiva sarva arhanam, you worship everything, you take care of everything, achyutejya, by the worship of Achyuta, Lord Krishna. We need to understand this most important truth and principle. People are today completely misled by the ignorant slogans, by the foolish slogans of Jana Seva, Janagdana Seva, Manava Seva, Madhava Seva. Where do you find this? In which Veda, in which scripture of the entire world do you find such a statement? In fact, the Upanishads say, Yasmin tushte Jagat Tushtaha. You do only Manava Seva, Jana Seva. What about all the living creatures? And even how much Jana Seva, Manava Seva can you actually do? Can anyone actually do? 10 people, 100 people, a million people? Not more. Whereas and even that is insufficient. It is in the illusory realm of samsara, so it's completely worthless and futile. The real seva, the real service is to water the root of the world, of the universe, of everything, and that is Achyuta Shri Krishna. By worshipping the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, Yasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtaha, the entire universe would be completely be nourished, satisfied, and everything will be in abundance and plenty. And one can also understand the real truth of this material world, the real purpose and objective of each and every one of us in this material world, and attain that supreme perfection of life, to surrender and reconnect ourselves with the Supreme Lord and go back to His eternal kingdom, as the Prachetas also did by receiving these valuable instructions from Narada. And in 31st chapter of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the final chapter, the Prachetas also then being guided by Narada and also being previously guided by Lord Shiva, they follow the path of complete dedicated spiritual life, and in this way they also attain the supreme perfection of going back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual world. And thus concludes the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you have any questions, please do post them on the in the WhatsApp group or in the comments box. And please do join us for the continuation of the systematic study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.